Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute game changer that is the psychology of money, the hidden soft skill of wealth. Now, you might be wondering, isn't finance just a bunch of math? Like a hard science with spreadsheets and rigid formulas? Well, what if I told you it's actually much more of a behavioral game? Let's take a look.
4,000. Keep that number in your head for just a second. To put this into perspective, back in 2018, roughly 2.8 million people passed away in the United States. But out of all those millions, only about 4,000 individuals had a net worth of over $8 million. That is an incredibly tiny, highly exclusive fraction of the population, and it sets up our ultimate mystery for today. Who exactly are the people in this elite financial club? And more importantly, how did they pull it off?
Which leads us straight to a really fascinating core question. How in the world did a humble gas station attendant beat a Harvard MBA? Seriously, we're talking about a guy named Ronald Read. He somehow managed to end up right there in that elite group of 4,000 people, sitting alongside and actually surpassing highly educated Wall Street-level financial executives. How is that mathematically or even logically possible? Let's look at the facts. On one side, you've got Ronald Read. He spent 25 years fixing cars as a mechanic, and then another 17 years sweeping floors as a JCPenney janitor. Pretty average blue-collar life, right? Now, contrast that with Richard Cohn. This guy was a Harvard MBA graduate who had such a wildly successful, high-flying financial career that he actually retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. So we've got an everyday, working-class guy contrasted directly against high-society financial success. But here is the massive plot twist. When Ronald Read passed away in 2014 at the age of 92, he absolutely shocked everyone. He died with a staggering $8 million to his name, and he didn't hoard it either. He left $2 million to his family and $6 million to a local hospital and library. Listen, he didn't win the lottery, he didn't hit the jackpot at a casino. So how on earth did the janitor out-earn the executive? Well, it all comes down to their everyday habits. Ronald's approach was surprisingly simple. He consistently saved whatever he could, he patiently invested those savings into solid, blue-chip stocks, and then he just waited. For decades. Richard, on the other hand, despite his massive income, he lived incredibly extravagantly. He bought this sprawling, crazy mansion with 11 bathrooms and 2 elevators. It cost him $90,000 every single month, literally just to maintain it. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, Richard's over-the-top lifestyle completely ruined him. He went bankrupt. Ronald's boring, patient habits totally wiped the floor with Richard's extravagance. And that right there highlights a concept called the financial soft skill. The undeniable reality is that how you behave with money is way, way more important than your sheer intelligence, your IQ, or the prestige of your college degree. Wealth is not a hard science where the smartest person automatically wins. No way. It's a soft skill. It's totally about your psychology and the quiet, everyday choices you make. All right, moving right along to our next section, luck, risk, and reality, the unseen forces of success. Let's break down the sheer mathematical odds of success using Bill Gates as an example. Think about this. Back in 1968, there were roughly 300 million high school students globally. Out of those, about 18 million were in the US. Narrow it down further, and you had about 270,000 in Washington state. And finally, only about 300 students attended Lakeside School, which just so happened to be one of the only schools in the entire world with a computer at that time. Bill Gates was one of those 300 kids. This just brilliantly illustrates that getting access to a computer in 1968 was a literal 1 in a million stroke of pure, unadulterated luck. Honestly, even Bill Gates himself admits that without Lakeside, Microsoft probably wouldn't even exist. But listen, luck has a much darker cousin, and that is risk. See, Bill Gates totally benefited from a 1 in a million positive luck event, but he actually had a best friend named Kent Evans, who was just as smart, just as skilled, and was coding right alongside him. Tragically, though, Kent became the victim of a 1 in a million negative risk. He died in a freak mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school. It's wild to think about, but extreme luck and extreme risk, they are quite literally two sides of the exact same coin. So what does this all mean for us? It brings up a really thought-provoking question, originally inspired by Nobel laureate Robert Shiller. What is the exact role of luck in successful outcomes? When you see someone achieve massive astronomical success, or when you see someone fail completely, you have to remember that luck and risk are constantly operating in the background. We really shouldn't blindly worship the winners, and we definitely shouldn't harshly judge the losers, simply because not every outcome is perfectly tied to individual effort. That takes us to our next major concept, the power of enough, escaping the comparison trap. I want you to listen to this statement. It's so powerful. I have something he will never have. I have enough. This actually comes from a great story where the author and his friend were at this insanely lavish party hosted by a billionaire. The friend leans over and points out that the billionaire host probably makes more money in a single day than the author might make in his entire lifetime. But instead of feeling jealous or inadequate, the author just dropped that incredible punchline. It's such a profound realization about what true wealth actually looks like. And that brings us to the actual definition of enough. It is the psychological state of finally realizing when to stop taking wildly unnecessary risks just to impress other people. Now, to be clear, having enough doesn't mean you're settling for less or giving up on your ambitions. It just means you're protecting your own happiness and your current wealth from that toxic, endless hunger for more. Social comparison is a hamster wheel you can literally never win on, so the ultimate life hack is simply knowing when you have enough. Which leads us perfectly into our final section, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Two completely different games. Okay, consider this absolute tragedy of a story. Back in the 1920s, a guy named Abraham Germansky builds this massive, sprawling real estate empire. Right around the same time, Jesse Livermore is making a name for himself as a brilliant stock trader. Then, October 1929 hits. The market completely crashes. Germansky loses absolutely everything and tragically takes his own life. Livermore, on the other hand, actually shorted the market and made the equivalent of $3 billion in a single day. Talk about a win, right? But wait, here's the kicker. After 1929, Livermore becomes immensely overconfident. He starts taking massive, reckless risks, loses all of his billions, and ultimately suffers the exact same tragic fate as Germansky. One guy lost at the start, the other won at the start, but they both ended up failing because of their future behavior. You see, these two phases of wealth require entirely opposing psychological traits. Getting wealthy, that's all about taking big swings, being super optimistic and constantly pushing boundaries. But staying wealthy, that requires the exact opposite. It demands a healthy dose of paranoia, a lot of frugality, and a strict survival mindset. The crazy truth is that the very traits that get you rich can actually make you poor if you don't know exactly when to switch gears. If you want the ultimate playbook for the survival mindset, just look at Warren Buffett. The man has survived 14 economic recessions. 14. And he did it without once panicking or selling off his assets out of fear. He consciously steered clear of catastrophically bad investments. He never forced business decisions just to stroke his own ego. He has consistently maintained a mindset of long-term survival over the frantic pursuit of extreme unchecked growth. So here's the bottom line. Good investing isn't always about making these brilliant, super complex decisions that nobody else saw coming. Mostly, it's just about consistently avoiding the terrible ones. True financial longevity comes from sheer survival. It comes from knowing your own limits, keeping your ego in check, and protecting your assets against those massive wipeout mistakes. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to think about today. Are you playing the game to get wealthy, or are you actually playing the game to stay wealthy? I'd encourage you to take a hard look at your own financial psychology, your everyday behaviors, and where exactly you've set your own finish line for enough. Because at the end of the day, understanding the difference between those two games might just be the most incredibly valuable soft skill you'll ever master. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning how you think about success.